But we're going to start in the association with our NBA panel. DraftKings contributor Garion Thorne, DK Live junior sports editor Chinmay Vaidya, and RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Fellas, it is NBA Shootaround time. So we are breaking down tonight's best DFS and sportsbook plays for the 8-game slate. So let's start with DFS. Garion, who is your absolute must-roster favorite player tonight?
Yes, we've got the 4 absolute studs up over 11K tonight. And I think if you're trying to figure out which of those 4 you're starting your lineups with, I'm probably going to lean towards Giannis. The potential up-tempo script of that Denver OKC game is a little enticing, but as we saw in the Nuggets' last contest against Portland, Jokic might only play like 26 minutes. He still grabbed, I think it was like 18 rebounds in those 26 minutes, but he only scored 8 points, and he was held under 50 DraftKings points. Giannis, this should be a highly competitive game against the Heat. Obviously, the Heat are not an opponent you love to face in a DFS perspective, but Milwaukee kind of provide their own environment. They are an up-tempo team. They are 5th in pace across the last 10 games. That has been consistent across the entirety of the season. And Giannis has kind of reached that Jokic territory of efficiency in the last little bit. His last 11 starts, he's averaging 1.84 DraftKings points per minute played. So if he's in a situation tonight where he's getting anywhere close to 35 minutes in a competitive script against a team Milwaukee has to catch in the Eastern Conference playoff standings, he's going to have a massive night. So I think Giannis is my 1-8 on Wednesday.
All right, Chinmay, are you going with one of those 4 studs who are over 11K?
I think I have to. And I think it's obvious, when you have the top 3 front runners for MVP, those are the guys that you have to go with. And the Sixers and Nuggets are likely going to be in blowout games. But I'm going to go with James Harden as the perimeter guy. I think he has more upside than Embiid in terms of 3-pointers and assists. And he's played really well in his first 2 games in Philly. And both of those guys are good plays, but I really like James Harden in this one. I think he has continued to show why he is one of the best players in the league when he's right, and he's finally right in Philadelphia. So James Harden has a little more upside than Embiid to me, so I'm going to go with the beard.
All right, Nick, who is your absolute must-roster favorite player tonight?
Yeah, I think for me it would be Harden as well. I kind of want to ride this out, this I guess honeymoon period that he has with the 76ers, where I think a lot of people thought, former MVP James Harden, like that guy was gone. A lot of people thought, as he moved into his kind of closer to his mid-30s, we were going to see a different phase of James Harden's career. And as it turns out, he just wasn't really trying in Brooklyn and could immediately flip that switch. And we've seen it in his first 2 games with the Sixers. So, I mean, James Harden looks like 2018 MVP James Harden. So I want to ride this out as long as I can. You can't necessarily depend on getting 16 assists and 5 steals like he had against the Knicks in their last game. That's not going to happen every night, but the points should be there. The rebound should be there. And, 8 to 12 assists is pretty realistic on a nightly basis. So he's my favorite, pay up play on this slate. I'd also look at SGA against Denver. He's at 10K. The Thunder have, I think, 7 guys already ruled out of this game. More could possibly be coming before tip-off. So it's going to be the SGA show. No Dort, no Giddey. Basically, as long as OKC can keep this game respectable and can justify keeping SGA in the game, he's going to be by far, far and away the main option for that team.
All right, Chinmay, so you're paying up for the beard. He's going to cost you $11,200. So who's shaping up to be the best value play for you?
I really like Cameron Johnson, the small forward on the Suns. I believe he's in the 5K range right now. 19-3-3 in his last 3 games, which are all starts. And his shooting splits are 50, 40, and 100. He hasn't missed a free throw in that time. The Suns really want to get him involved in their offense. And if we saw, remember last year in the finals, they really lost those games, not because the stars were not performing, but because these role guys like Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson weren't giving them that production. So with Chris Paul out now for basically the rest of the regular season, I expect the Suns to keep having Cameron Johnson involved in their offense. So I'm going to go with him as the value play tonight.
All right, Nick, you got to give us some value here. Where are you going?
Yeah, Kevin Love is one guy who jumps out, and it's been a little bit more feast or famine of late with Kevin Love than you'd like. He was so consistent, for the first 50-odd games of the year, and it kind of hit the skids a little bit around the All-Star break, but bounced back in a big way against Minnesota earlier this week. So hopefully he's back on track. I think he's a pretty solid value at 5,500. Other than that, I'm going to look to that OKC game. Like I mentioned, I think it could get ugly. Denver should win this one fairly easily. This is one of 4 games on the slate that currently has a spread of at least 10.5. So they're 4 games we project to be close, 4 games we project to be blowouts. This is one of them, but there's going to be some value here. I mean, someone has to start alongside SGA. Someone has to play 25 plus minutes. And I think 2 of those guys are Alexei Pokusevski, who's at 4,100. I think he's probably going to start at small forward. They're virtually out of options there. And then Isaiah Roby, who not too long ago was essentially exiled from this team, was spending time in the G League. And now here we are, and he's back as the starting center pretty much every night. So neither of those guys are super exciting. Neither of those guys are players you want to roster in season long. But when they're at 4,100 and 4,400 respectively, they make for pretty solid DFS values.
All right, Garion, who do you think is a solid DFS value tonight?
Yeah, I think you have to go to that Thunder game. They're just missing so many people, and I think Nick mentioned the 2 guys who I feel safest about. I think Roby got into some foul trouble in his last game. That is obviously a very concerning thing going up against Nikola Jokic tonight. Only played 20 minutes in his last game, and then Olivier Sarr came in and played like 25. So, I mean, maybe if you think Roby's going to stay out of foul trouble, you go with Roby. If you think he's going to get into foul trouble, Sarr could be a little enticing, although very dangerous, someone whose floor is just non-existent. In that same way, I think Poku has actually been playing like quietly the best basketball of his career the past month or so. Since the beginning of February, he's averaging over a DraftKings point per minute. So again, I think those 2 guys are the safe plays, but I'm sorry if I've talked about Vic Krejci way too much on this show. I mean, I know I bring him up every single day, but I think Krejci is kind of quietly maybe the best value play on this slate. He is the bare minimum at 3K. And when Aaron Wiggins, who started their last game against the Kings, got hurt in the middle of the first quarter and was unable to return to that game, it was Krejci who started in his place in the second half and played all 12 minutes of the third quarter. That's how desperate the Thunder are for just warm bodies at this point. He finished that game 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, almost 30 minutes played. Was 0 of 6 from 3-point range. So if he can just knock in a couple of those threes, you're probably looking at like 8x, 9x value from this guy who I had definitely heard of before this morning.
Okay, heading over to the sportsbook. Nick, is there like a game total that you're going to be targeting? Kings Pelicans has the highest total on the slate with 235.5.
Yeah, these are tough. I normally there's 1 or 2 that jump out, but with the amount of potential blowouts, I mean, there's just kind of so much going through your head as far as what the game script is going to be in some of these. You mentioned that Pels Kings game over 230 or 235.5 is the total. I think I would go over on that. I mean, Sacramento has gone over in almost 60% of its road games this season. That Pelicans offense starting to look a lot better since the arrival of CJ McCollum. They're a top 10 offense over the last 10 games. This just feels like a game that you're going to check, whatever app you use at like 10:30 tonight, and it's going to be like 135 to 128. I can't provide any evidence as to why that's going to happen, but it just seems like a game that's going to get out of control. The other one that I'm keeping an eye on is I kind of like the under. 229.5 was the last number I saw in Utah and Houston tonight. And, this is essentially banking on this being a massive blowout in favor of the Utah Jazz, because the Utah offense should be able to score at will. Houston has been by far the worst defense in the NBA over its last 10. Utah third in offense in that span, but the Jazz play really slowly. Houston's missing some key pieces. Kevin Porter likely to sit tonight. Eric Gordon expected to sit out on a back-to-back. I don't think Houston is going to hold up its end of the bargain here. So even if Utah, scores in the 120s, I think this could be a game where Houston struggles to get over 100.
All right, Garion, tough to choose here, but do you have one that you're targeting?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the under in that Charlotte-Cleveland game. It's 217.5 right now. Generally speaking, taking unders in Hornets games has been a bad idea, although they have been trending towards the under lately. They are actually 9-4 to the under in their last 13 games, primarily because despite the fact they continue to run at a very up-tempo pace, they've had the worst offensive rating in the Eastern Conference in that span of time. They are just having a really hard time scoring the basketball, whereas Cleveland has always kind of leaned towards the under this season. They are a defensive-based basketball team. 61% of their games have gone to the under this season. That is the highest mark of any Eastern Conference team. and they've been playing some real 90s basketball without their point guards. A lot of like 92 to 86 kind of games the past couple of weeks. So obviously, keep an eye on Darius Garland. He is questionable for this game. If he does play, I'm a little less inclined to chase this number. But if we're looking at 48 minutes of Brandon Goodwin and Tim Frazier, I just don't think there's enough offensive potential in this game to get over this number.
Yeah, that one already creeping up to 218.5, but odds and lines are subject to change. Chinmay, is there a game total that you're targeting?
Yeah, I like the Heat Bucks over, and I know that can be against conventional wisdom. Miami is one of the better defensive teams in the league, and Milwaukee, we know what they're capable of defensively, but the Heat have gone over in 2 of their last 3 games, and even with Kyle Lowry out again, I like Gabe Vincent and Tyler Hero to step up and have big games again. And the Bucks have gone over in 8 straight games prior to their under against Charlotte, as we just mentioned, has been playing some pretty rough basketball of late. So I like the Heat and the Bucks over. If it goes a couple more points up, I might trend away from that. But as of right now, I think it's sitting at a pretty nice total, and that's the one that I'm looking at right now.
Okay, Garion, what's a spread or money line that you're looking at tonight?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a popular one, but I'm going to go with the Pelicans -6 against the Kings. They're just playing some really nice basketball right now. They've got the second best net rating in the NBA across their last 5 games, outscoring teams by 11.2 points per 100 possessions. You want to pull that back to 10 games, they're still outscoring their opponents by 6.6 points per 100 possessions. That's a really healthy number, whereas Sacramento is Sacramento. So they've been struggling, and they haven't looked good defensively. It's a relatively big number for this Pelicans team. I understand that, but they've also been 5-1-1 ATS their past 7 games as a favorite. So they've been taking advantage of these games they should win as of late. And with the Lakers continuing to lose, I mean, this is a motivated team. They are gunning for that play-in tournament. So I think they're going to take care of business tonight.
Chinmay, biggest spread on the slate is that Thunder Nuggets game, 14.5.
Yeah, you probably want to avoid those spreads in double digits where you get random events happening and teams go on runs late, and it's a blowout game. The team up big is sitting their best players. But I like Sixers and Nuggets, and you can probably parlay with some player props for Embiid, Harden, and Jokic in those games and get better odds. So I like Nuggets and Sixers, either spread or money line, but also make sure that you bring in some player props in there and parlay that with either Harden, Embiid, or Jokic. I believe Jokic triple-double is always going to be plus money, so that might be a good one to take a gamble on with the spread or money line in that game as well.
All right, Nick, you got a spread or money line that you're looking at tonight?
Yeah, I mean, normally I would agree that some of these big-time spreads are stayaways, but I think a couple of these are just such big mismatches that, even if you get a late rally by the team that's down big, maybe at halftime or at the end of the third, I still think you could feel okay about covering, a 14-point spread if you're the Utah Jazz, or 14.5 if you're Denver. I think Utah's the team that I probably trust a little more here. I mean, Denver certainly should and will win this game against OKC, but there's a kind of a path there to Denver playing with his food a little bit and maybe not turning this one into a complete blowout. But man, I think Utah on the road at Houston is a really, really good spot for the Jazz. Like I said, the Rockets are likely going to be missing 2 starters. They're not a good team anyway. They're the worst defense in the league. Again, even if they turn things over to Josh Christopher or whoever in the fourth quarter, if it's a 25-point game going into the fourth, I just don't see them, mounting that kind of run. So never feel great, when you're laying 2 touchdowns in a game like this, but I really like Utah -14 on the road.